It all begins with a warning: no minors allowed past this point. Soon, we find ourselves inside the hangout of the Jimmies, a group of teens who blindly follow their leader, Jimmy Crystal. They corner a small boy named Spike, hurling insults, laughing at him, and humiliating him mercilessly. But then, a commanding voice cuts through the chaos. It's Jimmy Crystal, reminding everyone that this isn't a game. What's about to happen is a fight to the death, with no mercy and no compassion. Jimmy Crystal then begins to pray to his father, whom he calls the Dark Lord, Satan himself. He solemnly asks him to look at the boy and decide if he's worthy of proving his value. All the Jimmies bow their heads in respect, honoring the Dark Lord, also known as Old Nick, whom they believe is Jimmy Crystal's father, the living embodiment of the devil. Spike is forced to fight one of the Jimmies. The boy is bigger, stronger, and brutal, and he leaves Spike seriously hurt. But just as the Jimmy mocks him and walks away, Spike seizes a moment of opportunity and stabs the attacker in the leg. One of the girls in the group tries to help, but another Jimmy stops her, reminding her that the rules forbid interference. Against all odds, Spike wins. The knife hits a major artery, and the attacker collapses, bleeding out in front of everyone. Spike is left traumatized, struggling to comprehend the gravity of what he just did. After the fight, Spike introduces himself, but Jimmy Crystal tells him his name no longer belongs to him. From now on, he is Jimmy. Then, shocking everyone, Jimmy Crystal removes the wig from the fallen Jimmy, revealing a scar in the shape of a cross beneath it. They leave the hangout with Spike, who walks in silence, still in shock. Meanwhile, in a dark, quiet forest, a man slowly picks fruit when suddenly a group of infected emerges from the trees and chases him. The Alpha, the biggest and strongest of them all, catches him, strikes him down, and kills him with brutal strength, celebrating as if it were a glorious victory. At the same time, we see Dr. Kelson carrying an infected pregnant woman away from the shelter, moving her body far from danger. Nearby, Samson, the infected we saw hunting earlier, feeds on the remains of his victim. Amid this chaos, he hears Dr. Kelson softly singing. Curious, Samson follows him from a distance, observing carefully. Dr. Kelson notices him and prepares for an attack, but instead of running, he uses a device to inject morphine into Samson, leaving him helpless. Then he speaks to him, revealing his name is Samson. He explains that he gave him this name because of his massive size, insane strength, and his hair, and because he witnessed Samson rise as the new alpha in the forest. Kelson jokes that Samson owes him, then laughs, saying he doesn't owe him anything after all. After this encounter, the doctor returns home. He goes down to his basement, lights all his candles, puts on music, and dances slowly. Then he sits naked, looking at old family photos, sinking into nostalgia and loneliness. Hours later, he's back in the forest, waiting for Samson again. He prepares his sedative weapon and takes position. When Samson appears, Dr. Kelson explains he has what Samson wants, the sedative that can calm him, but warns that if Samson attacks and kills him, he'll never have it. Samson approaches calmly, no longer as terrifying as before, and the doctor successfully sedates him. He speaks gently, asking if Samson understands, or if he can recognize that he poses no threat. He expresses how incredible it would be to hear Samson say even one word, a small miracle showing that the infection hasn't completely replaced his mind, and that he may still have fragments of his former self. Believing Samson just wants peace, the doctor says there's nothing wrong with taking a moment to rest. Trusting this, he injects himself with a sedative and falls asleep beside Samson. Hours later, he wakes to find Samson unharmed but gone. Dr. Kelson happily returns to his basement to make more sedatives. Samson begins visiting him frequently, bringing offerings like deer heads. They spend time together, dance, and even let the rain fall on them. Samson is mesmerized by the raindrops, feeling alive again, which fills the doctor with joy. Elsewhere, a tree covered in skulls stands like a dark monument. In the forest, three people decide to explore, splitting up to move faster while picking fruit. They spot an infected nearby and hide. The oldest, Yonu, isn't afraid. He volunteers to distract the infected so the others can escape, but he is quickly killed. When the survivors return home, they tell George, who lives with them, that they've lost Yonu. George responds that they aren't the only ones with news. The Jimmies have arrived. The newcomers eat ravenously while the host remains silent, unsure what to say. A girl asks why they're here. Jimmy Crystal replies that they were welcomed with open arms, fed and treated well, their hunger and hearts filled. She asks when they'll leave, but Jimmy Crystal coldly says they're staying, and that they plan to kill them. Panic sets in. The girl is revealed to be pregnant. Jimmy Crystal sends one of his followers, Jimmy Inc. to find other places to settle. On the way, she encounters the previously infected man, but nothing happens. She strikes first and escapes. Meanwhile, Drive. Kelson and Samson continue bonding, with Samson slowly reconnecting with the world. Jimmy Inc. scouting for a new home, spots them from afar. Back at the barn, the Jimmys and the family wait in silence. Jimmy Crystal begins telling his story. Old Nick saw that humanity had failed, and that there was no salvation left. So, Old Nick released the demons, the infected, and God did nothing because he was invisible. That's how the world of men became Old Nick's land, and his kingdom turned into hell. He continues, then Old Nick spoke to his favorite son, Jimmy Crystal, telling him he would be his right hand. He would have 7 fingers, each a claw. Only he would be his heir, and those 7 fingers would hold up his crown. Jimmy Crystal now openly presents himself as Old Nick's favorite son. He says that they travel across the land searching for souls for their father, offering what he calls charity to the people they meet. Then he reveals the truth. His 7 fingers are the Jimmys themselves. With a twisted smile, Jimmy Crystal steps forward and announces that tonight's act of charity will be the taking of the shirts. His words land like a death sentence. Immediately, the Jimmys attack without mercy. As screams echo through the place and fear takes over, Spike can't handle what he's witnessing. His stomach turns, and he runs into the hallway, vomiting and shaking uncontrollably. At that exact moment, Jimmy Inc. returns from scouting a new place for the group. She finds Spike there and coldly tells him to stay where he is, take a deep breath, and calm down, because this is only the beginning. Back with Samson, we see him standing beside the doctor at the Tower of Skulls, surrounded by bones bleached by time. The wind moves through the remains, sounding like ancient whispers. Dr. Kelson, whose first name we now learn is Sirius, tells Samson they need to talk. He admits that the medicine he's been giving him isn't a single drug, but a mix of many substances, with morphine being the strongest. But there's a problem. With the amount he uses, he only has enough left for 2 more weeks. And for the past 28 years, he's walked over 120,000 kilometers searching for more, without finding a single drop. This strange peace they found together is coming to an end. Still, the doctor says he has something else to offer. A different kind of peace. A home by his side. A peace that doesn't depend on needles or bottles. He believes that's why they became friends. Then, in a low and trembling voice, he tells Samson that if he gives even the smallest sign of consent, he will help him rest forever. He speaks of it as an act of love. And then, the impossible happens. Samson slowly opens his mouth, like he's remembering how to speak, and says just one word, moon. The doctor freezes, tears filling his eyes. That single word means more to him than all his years of searching. Meanwhile, Jimmy Crystal gathers his followers, and points at Tom, the man who had gone into the forest with the pregnant girl. He says he needs strong fingers worthy of holding Old Nick's crown. Tom is ordered to choose one of the Jimmys to fight. If he wins, he takes that place and becomes a Jimmy. If he loses, he receives charity. If he refuses, he still receives charity. Knowing there's no escape, Tom accepts and chooses Jimmy Ma. Jimmy Crystal raises his arms, and prays once more in the name of his dark father. The fight begins, but Tom is already exhausted. His punches are slow and weak. Jimmy Ma beats him without mercy, knocking him down and humiliating him. Just as he's about to finish Tom, Jimmy Ma stops and cruelly asks Jimmy Crystal for permission to go even further. That's when a shadow lunges from behind. It's the pregnant girl. Screaming with rage and despair, she attacks Jimmy Ma and kills him, ending the brutality. She knows this seals her fate, but it doesn't matter anymore. They see her, and chaos erupts. Everyone goes after her. In the middle of the panic, Tom, badly injured, and barely standing, drags himself to a gas tank. With the last of his strength, he ignites it. The explosion engulfs several of the Jimmys. Screams fill the air as fire consumes them. Tom wounds Jimmy Crystal's fingers, his most loyal followers, branding them with pain and flames. Spike and Jimmy Inc. hear the screams from outside and rush back. They find the Jimmys running in flames like burning shadows. One of them collapses and dies, overtaken by the fire. Amid the chaos, the pregnant girl manages to escape. Spike sees her running, and the leader orders him to go after her. Spike catches up and begs her to take him along. He says he doesn't want to stay in that cursed place. Terrified, she hits him to push him away, and keeps running without looking back. Spike stands there, watching her disappear into the trees, before slowly walking back with his head down. Jimmy Crystal explodes with rage when he realizes Spike let her escape. His voice roars as he says he will call on Old Nick to judge the boy, but Jimmy Inc. interrupts him. She reminds him that Old Nick can't be summoned at will, that he only appears when he chooses. She says she's seen him herself. Red skin, old, standing beside a pillar of skulls, with an alpha kneeling at his feet like a lamb before its master. That's why she insists old Nick must decide Spike's fate. Meanwhile, the doctor continues his research, reading books and old notes, until he suddenly realizes it's already daytime. Alarmed, he goes out looking for Samson. At the same time, the Jimmies follow him from a distance, watching closely. Jimmy Crystal realizes there really is an old man who fits the description. Even though he knows old Nick isn't real, and that he's been lying all along, he needs to keep his followers loyal. So he tells them old Nick is there. They ask if they'll meet him, if they'll finally see him. Jimmy Crystal says he must speak to him alone first and orders them not to move. He walks forward by himself, step by step, until he stands before the massive tower of skulls. The silence feels cursed, as if every bone is whispering stories of death. Jimmy approaches Dr. Kelson, fear and hope fighting in his eyes. With a shaking voice, he asks if he is old Nick. The doctor looks at him with exhaustion and deep sadness and says no, he's not a god. He's not a demon. If Jimmy means Satan, he's wrong. He's just a man. He points to the tower and explains it's not an altar, it's a monument to the dead, a crude way to remember people no one ever mourned. He explains that his skin looks the way it does because he covers himself in iodine every day to kill the virus. Then he reveals the truth that shakes Jimmy to his core. The infection didn't come from hell, came from science, human hands trying to play God, and failing. The doctor realizes Jimmy Crystal doesn't just believe in the devil, he lives for him. When Jimmy speaks about his father, his voice breaks. He admits he's never truly seen him. He only hears him sometimes, like a whisper in his head. A voice that guides him, pushes him, controls him, and terrifies him, even if he won't admit it. Far away, Spike talks with Jimmy Inc. His innocence is already gone. He says maybe old Nick is just a strange, lonely old man, and they should leave him alone. Jimmy Inc. wants to reject the idea, but doubt creeps in. She remembers that Jimmy Crystal never said he saw his father through the binoculars, only that he felt him. For the first time, she wonders if everything they followed was one giant lie. Back at the tower, Jimmy Crystal tells the doctor about his past. He lived near a church when the infected first appeared, flooding the world like a dark tide. He says his father walked among them, guiding them like lost sheep, repeating one line over and over, "Charity is home." That was the last time he claims he ever saw him. Finally, Jimmy lowers his head and admits the truth. His followers believe the doctor is old Nick. If he denies it, he could lose them, and if he loses them, they might kill him. His voice no longer sounds like a prophet. It sounds like a trapped man. He tells the doctor he can't reveal the truth without destroying everything he's built, so he offers a deal. The doctor must pretend to be old Nick, or he will kill him. Jimmy Crystal leans in with a smile full of menace, then walks away. Jimmy Crystal announces that the next night, old Nick himself will appear. He warns everyone that no one is allowed to touch him. Anyone who does will burn in flames. Only he, the chosen son, is allowed to stand beside his father. His words don't sound like a warning. They sound like a death sentence. Later, drive. Ian sits in front of Samson, near the Tower of Skulls. The wind moves the bones softly, almost like whispers from the dead. With a broken voice, the doctor admits that, when Jimmy Crystal threatened him, he felt real fear for the first time. Not the idea of death, but death itself. He thought about Samson being left alone, with no one to remember his name. That's why he decides to try something impossible. He explains that the infection doesn't just destroy the body, it damages the mind. The infected show brutal strength, empty eyes, and lose their tongues. But worse than that, they kill without reason. Babies, children. That means they see things that aren't real. A doctor would call that psychosis. And if it's psychosis, then maybe it can be treated. Samson isn't just a monster. He's someone who said the word moon. And that changes everything. Doctor. Ian gives him pills he made himself, and asks him to trust him, not as a patient, not as an infected, but as a friend. At dawn, Spike moves quietly through the forest, ready to run away forever. Suddenly, an infected blocks his path. Spike doesn't run. He fights with fear, anger, and desperation, and he wins. He kills it. But then a Jimmy appears. He accuses Spike of trying to escape and reminds him that during his test, Spike injured his friend. He raises his weapon to kill him. Spike closes his eyes, ready to die. Instead, Jimmy Inc. jumps in and kills the man without hesitation. Breathing hard, she looks at Spike and tells him that now he's her only friend, in a world with no mercy left. She says she's seen people die for trusting others, for being alone. That's why she begs him to stay by her side forever. Together, they go to Jimmy Crystal and explain what happened. But he doesn't care. He coldly says the truth will be decided that night, in front of old Nick himself. Later, Dr. Ian searches desperately for Samson, calling his name, but Samson is far away, washing himself in an icy river. Slowly, awkwardly, he begins to move like someone learning how to be human again. He reaches an abandoned bus and sits inside. Surrounded by broken seats and shattered windows, memories return. His life, his name, his voice. He speaks. The words are slow, broken, but real. Then footsteps interrupt the moment. Infected surround him. Samson stands up and fights them all, beating them back one by one. But there are too many. As night falls, Dr. Ian prepares his final plan. He lights candles, mixes chemicals, sets up fire, and plays music linked to satanic rituals. He knows it's dangerous, but doing nothing would be worse. The Jimmies arrive like a dark procession, led by Jimmy Crystal. At the Tower of Skulls, Dr. Ian appears, singing in a voice that feels unnatural. Fire moves in the air. Fear takes over their minds. Drugged and terrified, they believe they are seeing a god. Dr. Ian rises and declares himself Old Nick. He demands loyalty. Then he points at Spike and says he has one final request. The Jimmies must kill Jimmy Crystal to prove their faith. But Jimmy Crystal understands. He smiles. He steps forward and shouts that it's all fake. Before anyone can react, he stabs the doctor. Blood hits the ground. Chaos erupts. Some Jimmies rebel. Others scream. Violence explodes. In that moment, Jimmy Inc. makes her choice. She kills the remaining Jimmies, sparing only Spike. With tears in her eyes, she approaches the wounded doctor and promises to finish his final order. She walks up to Jimmy Crystal and kills him, ending the man who built everything on lies. Spike stands frozen. Jimmy Inc. takes his hand, and together they walk away. On the road, she finally tells him her real name, Kelly. When everyone is gone, Samson returns. He kneels beside Dr. Ian, thanks him, and understands the truth. The experiment worked. He's not just a beast anymore. Dr. Ian dies peacefully, knowing he saved at least one soul. Samson lifts his body gently and carries him away. Later, we see Sam living with Jim in a broken house, studying philosophy and talking about what it means to be human. Suddenly, they hear screams. Spike and Kelly are running, chased by infected. Without hesitation, they run to help. And the story ends with people who lost everything, yet still choose to remain human.